Chapter 17:21 Hunting Packs. With the golems in position, the group moved out from the boss's clearing, this time not sending Hawk and Ray ahead to gather everything. The enemies were arranged in hunting teams, and the wolverines would be harder to find, hidden in the underbrush. So, they would make their way to the next boss in the conventional manner and see what came up. The golems were in a defensive formation around them, while the elders prepared to be ambushed from the trees. Not that the hellhounds could climb them, but they were strong and fast enough to use them as a springboard and leap from dozens of meters away to land in the middle of a formation while the kobolds attacked the outer flanks. And that was exactly what happened. Incoming. Elder Alex called as the growls of hellhounds filled the air. They were already mid-leap, too late for anyone to change what came next. Great gouts of fire hit the hastily erected bulwark barrier over the team, which the hellhounds clawed and snapped at as they slid to the ground. Then the arrows from kobold archers began, and Dana whistled to warn the others that she was giving a command to her golems. They spread out to engage the hellhounds, while Oathbreaker and the Lich Lords from both Carl and Ray's teams engaged the rangers. Alex had given up on his sword, and had actually switched to a bow now, an unusual concession for a warrior who would normally just go chase the targets. However, with the number of golems, it was easier to target around them than to try to fit between them. Then the howling started to pull more groups, which was not how the dungeon was supposed to go. The hounds and their kobold handlers would only come one group at a time if you didn't move to engage, but they could hear the howling in the distance coming closer. I swear, you can't enter a dungeon without something strange happening. Elder Socrate sighed as he formed a thunderstorm overhead. What fun would it be if we had so many golems and only fought a half-dozen hounds at a time? Besides, this is so much more efficient. We didn't even have to go get them. Opal joked. Put up an illusion so that they're not going to jump right into the middle of our group, would you? I don't know about you, but I'm not much of a tank. The tiny Fae laughed. She wouldn't even be a mouthful for the hounds. If she was attacked, being swallowed whole, and needing to fight her way back out was a very real threat. They're coming from every side. Dana noted. Just how many groups of hounds and kobolds are there supposed to be in here? 30 or so. Dana sighed. Of course, there were going to be 30 groups of them. They could never pick a short dungeon when they somehow pulled everything. At this rate, they would be lucky if the bosses stayed on their platforms. The golems shifted positions as the first group was eliminated and encircled the team so that they were in position for the next attack. Leo and Socrate created a net of vines overhead to reduce the damage taken by their barriers during the initial assault. The hellhounds were coming fast, and Socrate was beginning to get nervous, but Alex and Carl both looked far too calm. Not going to panic a little? The alchemist asked. Nope. We can't kill them until they get here. I've got plenty of area damage skills, and Ray is waiting to start resurrecting the hellhounds that she killed with blood destruction. It's going to get busy, but we're not going to be in any real danger. Carl insisted. Dana shrugged as Kushal, the final and mostly silent member of their team, turned to her for confirmation. He didn't say anything, just accepted it. Dana wasn't panicking, and she was the golem mistress, the one whose summoned constructs had the most combat capability. Perhaps not in total volume, but individually. It was just a shame that Carl's large group summoning spells were necromantic in nature, and she couldn't use them, as her class was focused on golems, not the undead. The hounds charged into the front ranks of the undead, their claws finding very little traction against the shields of the spectral knights who had stopped the advance. Then, the area damage spells went up. Fire filled the skies, and the ground softened as Naga Swamp made the whole area hostile to the fire element beasts. Normally, Hawk would have been outraged, but as the hounds were fire-resistant, he was focused on the kobolds anyhow, and the Naga was doing a fine job of tormenting them. He just wished she would use something other than water magic. Remy laughed as she listened in on Hawk's thoughts, then added a bit more rain to the thunderstorm spell she had active. Even normal water was an annoyance for the hellhounds, and the spell dropped a lot of it, interspersed with hail, lightning, and tornadoes. Just a little extra spice for the ongoing apocalypse spell that had blanketed everything over top of Opal's toxic fog. Ray vanished into the distance, going after the kobold archers in the woods. That was her natural element, and with the limited light, there was very little chance that they could even see their death coming before she was on them. The creatures had fairly solid damage output, but they were not durable. The usual tactic was to focus on taking them down with range skills while the hounds were held in place, then finish the hounds. It would have the group take less overall damage. In this situation, there were so many hounds, so many golems, and so much everything, including fog and fire vortexes, that everyone was just picking something to hit, while Carl and Dana organized the formation of the constructs, preventing anything from getting to the group members inside. Chapter 17:22 Wolverines. The first thing to arrive was not the hounds, but the wolverines. 30 kilos of fangs and anger, shaped roughly like Kara, but with light brown fur that made them look more like an angry, tiny bear. The larger golems had a hard time dealing with them, as they were so close to the ground, attacking the lower legs and trying to rush past to get to the inner ranks of the defenders. And like Kara, it was a nightmare to stop them without putting up an actual barrier. Nobody wanted to do that, as it would stop them from effectively attacking outward and make their sight lines even more limited than they already were. So they were going to have to get into melee combat, even with so many golems around. Kara, for one, was overjoyed. Not only were they her size, but they were sneaky sorts. Sure, they were driven insane by the dungeon, but they were still intelligent enough to avoid the golems and go for the targets that looked much easier to shred. Unfortunately, appearances were deceiving. The first one that they went for was Dana, and with auto parry combined with her exceptional agility, they were having zero luck hitting her while the mage continually blasted them. Everyone had assumed that they would go for Carl next, as most dungeon mobs targeted by power level, then went for the healers. But the Wolverines didn't. Instead, they went for Elder Socrate and Remy. That greatly amused Kara, though she could see why the little snake was the next logical target. She was at the same power level as Carl and Dana, and while she was next to the Alchemy Elder, she was much smaller than everyone else, excluding Tion. The fox was standing on Leo's back, as the pair of them floated over the main battle, healing as needed, and using Leo's nature magic to create nets of vines that would slow the attacking forces down. Keeping them in the outer ranks of the battle, where the golems could take the damage, was a much better option. Unfortunately, while the Wolverines showed no intentions of coming up after them, the Hellhounds would be arriving soon, and they were perfectly capable of jumping high enough to attack the pair in their attempts to land in the middle of the battle. They would have to rely on Thor when the time came. He was the one with the best control over Bulwark, and that barrier was much more effective than anything else they had at preventing enemies from getting inside their formation. The howling of the Hellhounds was coming from all around them now, as the Kobold team leaders arranged them for one large assault. They weren't remaining stationary while they prepared the assault. They couldn't stage in place with the effects of apocalypse spreading through the area. But they also couldn't wait long, as they had no healers, and there was both toxic fog and burning embers blowing on the wind that would continually weaken them as they waited. So, the moment that they had decided they were close enough to where they needed to be, a horn blew, and the whole section of the dungeon was charging at them. Hellhounds were tossed into the air by hellstorm vortexes, and the area was peppered with meteors as Hawk aimed to eliminate the kobolds who were guiding the battle. They were the smart ones, so they had to go first. This is getting out of hand. Elder Alex sighed, switching from his blade back to arrows as the last of the Wolverines who had made it to them were contained by Elder Socrate in a lightning cage. Give it a moment, and we'll start seeing the ranks thin again. Tion, how is the healing going? Carl called back. The fox yipped happily. He was still fine with healing the group. They weren't taking too much damage as limited invulnerability was doing the heavy lifting for them. Having the skills spread through the entire group was an immense advantage when it was normally only available to dedicated tank-type classes. Having it on all the golems made the common attacks of the Hellhounds mostly ineffective and turned the threat of the Hellhounds into more of a nuisance. Carl and Kara's Chaos Vortex attacks were particularly effective against the Hellhounds, second only to Remy's Water Elemental attacks. It only took a half-dozen attacks to eliminate a Hellhound, and that was giving Carl a great idea. He equipped the Haint Claw and moved into the front ranks, with Chaos Vortex cast individually on each claw. It took a few seconds to reactivate 10 copies of the spell, but when he swiped a hound with one hand and 5 copies of the spell hit at once, it tore through the creature's ribs and sent it flying, just in time for his other hand to swat an equally unfortunate hound away. This was actually going to strain his mana pool, Carl realized. Chaos Vortex was not a mana-friendly spell, but it had the highest damage out of anything that he could use, and most species had absolutely zero defense against it. Even most damage reduction abilities didn't work against the 5-dimensional vortex. Going for extra mobility, Carl shifted to cat demon form. It was more agile than his human form, and the tail could be used to balance himself during rapid movement. Mana flowed into him from the dungeon, as his natural regeneration rate struggled to keep up with the output of constant barrages of Chaos Vortex attacks. But the stacked attacks were clearing an entire section of the battle, leaving the golems free to refocus their attacks and shore up weaknesses in their line. Someone needs to teach me that skill. Alex complained as he watched the transformed pet sitter rampaging next to his spider. If you can use it, we will have Kara teach it to you later. It's one of her signature abilities. Dana agreed, with a slightly mocking smile. Whether he still wanted it or not was up to him. The skill was every bit as good as it looked, though. And while she wasn't certain that Alex would be compatible, if he could use it, the unpredictable effects of the chaos element would give him a great advantage in future challenges. Assuming that anyone was going to try to stop the new home merchant clan from entering hidden realms and dungeons in the near future after the carnage in the Templars' compound. Chapter 1723. They're no match. Carl paused to catch his breath and to shake the blood off of him. It might not stick to his barrier, but it was everywhere after dealing with the hellhounds, and now that the mob was beginning to thin, he had time to do more planning instead of just attacking the next thing trying to eat him. There were patches in the hellhound offensive now, and the number of archers that were supporting them had dropped dramatically. The kobolds were no match for Ray. For a few seconds, Carl considered the options as he absorbed some of the excess life and soul energy from his weapons. It might not be the direct growth that it provided at the mortal ranks, but the amount that he could use was vastly increased, and all he had to do was adapt it to what he wanted his immortal spirit to be, and it would stack on his own power. It wasn't yet a passive growth ability, but he was working on getting it there. There, a growing hole where the golems were pushing the hellhounds apart. Carl used Shadow Step to appear behind the hounds and Chaos Vortex on the haint claws to tear through them. Forcing them to turn away from the rest of the group made them extremely vulnerable, but with all of the packs in the region already gathered, Carl had little fear of the same happening to him. Ray laughed as Carl finally began to embrace her fighting style. Shadow stepping between targets was the best way to engage. They never knew what was coming for them until it was already too late. With only her 2 core golems accompanying her, she had managed to eliminate the majority of the range support for the hounds using that tactic. Getting through them left the hounds leaderless, and in the dungeon, their insanity made them much worse at cooperative efforts and pack hunting than she suspected they should be. In the outside world, a hellhound pack should be able to coordinate these numbers without any issues. But the small packs weren't working together, they were only working beside each other. That meant that when she finished the last of the archers, there was no more coordination going on, and she was free to join Carl on the outskirts of the pack, stabbing through scorching hot hellhound hide with impunity, knowing that only those closest to her would even respond to her presence. The fact that dungeon monsters were insane was possibly the greatest advantage ever. As the numbers dwindled, Dana, Thor, and Kara came out to fight outside the golems, leveraging their strengths in melee combat to increase the clear speed. Then, they were standing alone in a pile of corpses. "Hawk, did you run out of storage space? They're stringy and taste like hot rocks." Carl laughed at the bird's angry response. He had gone out to collect the kobold corpses and rejected them as unsuitable to take space in his food storage. But the hellhounds were apparently inedible. "Well, maybe you'll luck out with the boss, but I wouldn't count on it. Perhaps the final boss." Hawk laughed, a keening cry that made Dana smile. The last section was supposed to be full of bears and snakes, both of which Hawk generally considered to be edible. He circled over the boss platform. Cerberus was massive, a 3-headed hound that should more properly be considered a form of behemoth. Seriously, that thing was the size of a full-grown dragon. Elder Alex sighed as they approached the platform. Dealing with this thing is a nightmare. All three heads can breathe fire, but the majority of the incoming damage is going to come from his fire domain skill. Hawk transformed into a demon crow and landed in front of him, bumping his leg to demand more explanation. Thor had a lightning zone, which was good. Opal had her illusionary domain, which was even better. So, wouldn't a fire domain be even better? It had the same word as the illusion one, but it was fire, so it was obviously a step higher tier. I don't know if you can learn that just by fighting him, but it is a drop from the boss sometimes. That's how the clan got a copy of it. If it doesn't drop, you can ask Carl to purchase a copy from the clan for you. We will have more than enough credits by the time that we finish restocking the warehouse. Elder Alex reminded him. That was enough to mollify Hawk, who nodded, then flapped into the sky before transforming back into a dark flame phoenix. If he can transform, why doesn't he just use a humanoid form and ask questions? The Elder asked. He doesn't like humanoid form. It's a Hawk thing. He's perfectly capable of it, he just doesn't like to do it. Really? Elder Socrate asked dubiously. He really got the impression that the phoenix was more bestial than the others, not quite on the level of a highly intelligent divine beast species. That was normal for a phoenix, as the species rarely gain the ability to speak. But with Carl leading him, he should have advanced using the same skills that had made the others vastly more intelligent than their base. Hawk rolled his eyes, then landed next to them, and transformed into what was supposed to be a Tengu, using Unholy Beast transformation. Only, what he got was a harpy with deep blue feathers, clawed feet, and bird feet, with fingers at his central wing joints, so he could grab things. See, I can transform and speak just fine, Hawk retorted, still speaking avian. I see that. That's actually impressive. I've never seen a dark flame type harpy before. Hawk nodded smugly, then transformed again, and returned to circling, ready for the fight to start. Dana did her best not to laugh at the interaction. Hawk had managed to mess up the transformation again. Or perhaps that was how it always worked for him. She had never seen him try to use the humanoid side of the skill before, only the demon crow version that made him smaller, so he could more easily travel in public. Chapter 1724. Bullying Cerberus. Alright, if he breathes fire and uses a domain-type ability, we will need to spread out. Kara can work on limiting the effectiveness of the domain, but it will be mostly up to Remy and Socrate to keep healing totems up to heal the group. Carl suggested. Socrate shook his head. Unfortunately, a fire domain will burn the totems. Alright then, we will leave it to Leo and Tion. Leo has a healing over time skill, and Tion can do the same with his Holy Light skill. They will do the primary healing for the fire domain. Though, there might not be much incoming damage, now that everyone is under the effect of limited invulnerability. Elder Alex nodded. That skill to spread buffs to your whole group is absurdly overpowered, you know that, right? Carl nodded. And it gets more interesting. I've also got the Ancient Wisdom skill, so I can grant everyone in the team one of my skills, if it's an active one that I can't just use as a buff. So, if we're up against something that is mostly immune to someone's damage, we can give them a new attack skill. Elder Alex nodded. He also had the skill, and he had received it in the same manner that Carl had, by doing a favor for Elder Xiaobai. That old woman was a bit crazy, but her power was immense. It was just a shame that her daughter turned out as crazy as her. The last time that he had seen Anila, she was in a heated disagreement with her bonded Moor cat, and was losing the argument. The girl needed some serious help if she was going to develop her personality enough that she could even manage to get her own cat to take her seriously. Kushal cleared his throat, and then created a totem in his hand. Just stay near me, and the damage won't be too bad. I've got resistance totems for most elements. I might fight like a warrior most of the time, but I am a shaman-type class. Perfect. That will make life easier on the healers. Now, given his size, I suspect that it would be best if both Thor and I transformed. We can distract the boss, and everyone else can focus on damage. Carl offered. All right, let's do this. Carl nodded, and then activated Avatar to transform into World Dragon form before refreshing Warbeast to give himself more armor. Thor did the same, returning to Behemoth form before using Warbeast to armor his massive body. The appearance of the two immense threats caught the attention of Cerberus, despite the fact that they weren't within the boss engagement area yet. There was no time for things to get strange, though. Karl charged, with Thor circling to his left, aiming for a horn strike to the flank of the massive hound. Damn, that's terrifying. Immortal behemoths in both dragon and lizard form make the boss look like he's the one that should be working in a team for the battle. Elder Socrate joked as he moved to the opposite side of the boss. Thor and Karl both had epic-grade constitutions, so it technically was two bosses on one, even before the rest of them arrived. So, the Alchemy Elder wasn't wrong. The Cerberus was the one that should be afraid of them, not the other way around. In the dungeon, it couldn't feel that fear, but the boss was backing toward a cliff, putting his back against solid stone, so that the two largest attackers couldn't encircle him. Cerberus wasn't even paying attention to the rest of the group, not even when his fire domain activated and the golems charged into melee combat. The three-headed hellhound behemoth was too busy fending off the claws, jaws, and horns of Karl and Thor to even spare a claw for them at first. It did turn one head to eventually douse them in hellfire, lightly roasting the golems. But that was the extent of the attention that it could pay when Karl was trying to manhandle him to the ground so that Thor could ram him with those massive horns. Being as large as he was, that horn would punch a hole a meter wide halfway through the boss if Thor managed to get a solid enough hit on a soft spot. That wasn't something that Cerberus could afford. He snarled and bit down on Karl's forelimb with one head, but the dragon used that as a way to pull him onto his hind legs, limiting his mobility and forcing him to release or risk being gored. But not without a triple dose of Hellflame for the dragon first. The flames should normally have been devastating, and even against Karl's absurd levels of damage reduction, it still did nearly a third of his health and damage. Elder Alex whistled softly in appreciation for a truly tanky tank class. Taking 3 heads of flame breath at once was usually a party wipe event. You kept the heads separated so that they didn't focus on anyone. If they did, then you ran. The damage was lower if you were further away, and it had trouble hitting you if you were underneath the boss. However, none of those usual tactics mattered when you had a 100-meter-long dragon to throw at the boss. Assuming it could take the punishment, that was... One of the heads turned in the direction of Dana and Opal, but Karl spread his wing to balance himself as he tried to get at the throat of the boss, inadvertently blocking its line of sight, and any attempt it might have made at using fire breath in that direction. Kara nullified the fire domain again, giving the healers a bit of relief as the golems hacked away at the boss. Keeping all of them alive was stressing Tion out. Karl was too busy to refresh his golems when they got low, so if they wanted to keep the numbers up, they either needed to remind him or keep them healed. Most of the group was further back, and his healing spells had a limited area of effect. Leo had Rejuvenation active next to the boss, but Tion was covering the ranged attackers and had to manually target to help with the closer targets. He needed more healing skills. Maybe a healing song that he could switch to from Inspiration. Chapter 1725. The Boring Loot. Bit by bit, the Cerberus boss health was whittled away until it finally reached the 10% mark, and Elder Alex called out a warning. It's getting ready to enrage. Everyone, group up and prepare for heavy area damage. That was all the warning that Kara needed, and as soon as the boss finished its casting of Flame Explosion, she immediately nullified it, leaving only the lightest flicker of fire to warm their shields before the effect ended, and Karl was back into full melee combat mode. Or, we can just do whatever that was. Kara laughed at the Elder's confusion, then hopped on Cerberus' back to attempt to dig a hole so she could attack from the inside. It was unnecessary. With the concerted efforts of the group, the boss was dead half a minute later, and another purple chest sat in the center of the clearing, marking a successful boss kill. Well, we randomized one of them. Now, let's see what the boss was actually going to give us. Alex decided, before Kara could start picking things again. Fine, we can have the boring loot this time. The Elder chuckled as he reached down and opened the chest. Inside were a dozen immortal rank items, mostly armor pieces, and all at the rare grade, except for one epic grade dagger with poison damage and agility. It was an excellent dagger for any rogue-type class, but Kara was right, it was the boring loot. Compared to the porcine cleaver, a peerless grade item, powerful enough that even the bonuses on epic grade items looked sad, this really was the boring loot. Damn it, I hate when the badger is right. But this is actually what we need for the clan. Most people can't afford the really good loot, so getting mass amounts of rare and a few epic pieces is usually the best call. Especially after a battle where they would have broken many of their armor pieces. Carl shook his head in dismay. Just turn the broken stuff over to me. I will have the members of the Dark Light host fix it. They might be mortals, but our mythic crafters should be able to fix immortal rank armor that isn't demolished beyond system recognition. Oh, that is wonderful news. The few craftsmen that we have are so swamped they're booked half a year out. That's why everyone needs new gear. If they can get better stuff, they shouldn't break it as often, and they'll have an easier battle next time. So, this is a good opportunity for them, or a good excuse, depending on how you look at it. But if your team can fix a load of uncommon grade gear in a short turnaround window, the clan members will thank you for it. Our members will be overjoyed. It's one of the best ways for a mythic rank blacksmith, leatherworker, or tailor to expand their skills. And there's a chance that they can learn new patterns by repairing items they're not familiar with. It would also give him an excuse to pressure some of the newly advanced immortals into taking up a trade skill. Ozoff would not approve of sending such things home, but they could flood the market here in the immortal world if they could find enough crafting materials. That was something that Carl was going to have to work out soon. They had hide, but not a lot of gems and metals for armor and weapons unless they smelted down trash drops. And this dungeon didn't give them any. Alright, you said bears and snakes, right? Alex nodded. The snakes can be tricky, they don't have a heat signature, and they hide in the trees. But the bears are relatively easy to find. The pattern here is unclear, everything has a territory, but there is no clear path from here to the last boss. And since there isn't a clear path, most groups just go in a straight line, but I suspect that is not what is going to happen today. Carl smiled. I'm glad that you understand. We will spread out with the golems in teams while the core team heads for the boss. That will let us cover 4 or 5 times as much ground, and we can get all the bonus loot at the end of the dungeon for clearing more than most. There's almost always bonus loot at the end. The elders laughed at Carl's optimism, but the way that his group did dungeons, it was little wonder that they were always getting extra loot, either from fast boss kills or from clearing things that didn't need to be cleared. How are you going to split the golems? Socrate asked, ever the practical one. One team with each Oathbreaker. They're intelligent enough to lead troops as well as or better than I do, and they can communicate with each other. It makes coordination effortless. So, that's 4 Lich Lords, 6 Spectral Knights, 1 Greater Golem, and 1 regular Golem with each of the Oathbreaker demons. We can keep the Epic Guards and the Bodyguards with us. The elders examined the bodyguards, Carl's pair of Lamia, and Remy's trio of Naga warriors. They were capable enough combatants. The epic guards were specialists, with Carl's being a shadow drake treant, dark wood with scales on the fleshy portions, while Dana's was an obsession demon in tight leather armor. Both were high agility fighters, so they would do well enough in the forest, where ambushes were a very real danger. All right. As long as you think that you'll still be able to spot the snakes, we're ready to split up. The Oathbreaker demons played a quick game of rock, paper, scissors to see who got which lane through the woods, with the furthest routes, which would be the longest way through the woods, being the favored ones. The demons gave them the thumbs up, and Carl sent them off into the woods. They had a large enough group that they shouldn't have any issues with whatever they found, especially with Oathbreaker spreading his damage to everything that was in range. The more surrounded they got, the more damage he would be doing, so it was actually to the battle maniac demon's preference when things went wrong. Chapter 1726, Spirit Bears. Carl led the way forward, with Thor at his side. They were the most durable of the group, and not just by a small margin. Carl spotted movement in the trees and sent a chaos vortex up to the snake that was preparing to strike. The creature twitched and fell out of the tree, where it was hit by a half-dozen more skills before it reached the ground. The ambush has been reversed. Remy laughed. Dana spotted the next snake, and again it was mercilessly blasted out of the trees. But this time, the noise attracted one of the bears, and a massive spirit bear, a white-furred beast the size of a dire bear, towering over the group, charged through the trees. Thor moved to engage, and nearly got bowled over, his heels sliding through the soft ground as the bear rammed into his shield. Karl joined from the far side, his claws layered with chaos vortexes, but leaving the close side of the bear open for the others to attack freely. Blood flowed from the wounds in the bear's side, but some of the attacks appeared to do very little. Nearly forgot. Spirit bears are immune to physical damage. Use something elemental. Fortunately, Karl had Brutal Pugilist, which caused his unarmed strikes to target the opponent's weakest resistance. All he had to do was separate from the Haint Claw and use the claws of his own cat demon form. But it wasn't his damage that was lacking. Chaos damage seemed to do just fine against the bear, and the actual damage done by Karl's claws was minimal. However, the bleed effect was pretty solid. Ray joined Karl on the far side of the fight, while Thor kept the bear's attention as well as he could. There was damage coming from too many directions, and even if he taunted the enemy, it didn't have 100% uptime. The bear was just a dungeon mob, no matter how durable it was. Within a minute, they had it down and they were moving along. But Karl did wonder how the golems were going to do. They had elemental wrath on them, so they were doing fire damage, but he didn't know how effective that was. A happy screech pulled Karl's attention to the right, just in time to see a snake go flying through the woods towards another spirit bear. Direct hit. While Hawk celebrated, the bear tore the snake apart for inadvertently poisoning him. It wasn't easy to get dungeon mobs to turn on each other, but if you could get them to damage each other, it was one of the few ways other than mind control. But the bear was not going to be satisfied with just one snake, and he charged toward the group when Hawk dove through the trees to grab and hurl another one at him. The bear roared as it mauled the snake with multiple applications of rend. His head turned to the annoying phoenix. Hawk was laughing hysterically as he hunted for another snake. If he grabbed them by the tail and gave a twist, they flew so well like flicking a whip. As long as he hurled them at the bears, it didn't matter whether they damaged the bear or not. They would be out in the open where the team could attack them, and their best chance of reaching the team would be lost. Just keep it slow and steady. If we're full on mana and energy when we get to the boss, we don't need to take the extra break. Usually, the breaks in a long dungeon like this take longer than the actual fights. Alex informed them. Got it, Elder. Don't worry, we will be ready when the final boss is in sight. Oathbreaker, can I get an update? We're further ahead than you are, even though we're taking the long way. You're having too much fun playing with the snakes. We just let them attack the golems, since they're immune. Right? Limited invulnerability meant that you needed a lot of poison damage for it to register on the golems. Karl continued to lead the way through the forest, letting Hawk's newfound love for hurling snakes lead them to the targets. Just don't forget to pick them up after. I'm certain that they taste good, the phoenix reminded him. Don't worry, we're not leaving any of the meat behind. Fight after fight brought them closer to the final clearing until Karl found himself staring at the most curious sight. There was a tiny white bear standing on its hind legs, arms wide, trying to look intimidating, but visibly terrified. In nature, the spirit bears were an incredibly peaceful species that only knew one intimidation tactic, and it was using it. But Karl and Thor were both vastly larger than it was. Karl stopped, certain that this was the bondable special pet from the dungeon. Don't do anything dumb. That's not a dungeon monster, he warned the others. It looks like one to me. Could it be an albino vampiric panda? Elder Alex replied. The tiny creature growled at them, and Karl laughed. Then, she marched right past Karl and mimicked the creature's intimidation pose. They were close to the same size in animal form, and the bear was clearly confused by the action. It was the one doing the intimidating. Why was this strange winged creature mocking it? That wasn't how intimidation worked. The little bear tried to stomp its feet to show its power, but Kara mimicked it, dancing along with the bear's show. Finally, Dana broke character and began to laugh at the two beasts dancing with each other. The bear dropped back down onto all 4 feet, defeated. Then it marched over to Dana and lifted its arms, clearly demanding to be picked up. Should we put this little guy in a pet space or something? Maybe toss him in a villa stone until the boss fight is over? I'm sure that one of the rangers will want him. He's adorable. Carl winked at her. Oh, I have a much better idea than giving him to some simple ranger. That little bear is a quest item that rolls a rare class. And do you know who loves fluffy bears? You wouldn't. Oh, I totally will. I'll do it right now. Chapter 1727. Spirit Bear Boss. Elder Socrate cleared his throat. Would you mind filling the rest of us in? Because I can think of no fewer than 5 elders who have apprentices that would literally murder for that opportunity. In fact, some of the elders might go that far as well. Or they would have before you installed a class change obelisk in the clan compound. He wants to give this innocent little fluffball to a green dragon cleric. Carl nodded. She really is adorable, and Lotus loves girls, fluffy things, and bears. There is no better match for the rare spawn than a green dragon cleric that is on the verge of reaching immortality. Well, she might be a few months away, but not far. Elder Alex smiled. That actually sounds much more entertaining than what I had in mind. I thought that you would keep it. Carl shrugged. I suspect that I already had and advanced past the class that it's going to give. Plus, it's a spirit bear. A tank-type, divine beast. That's Thor's role. I'm not short on a tank for our group. And it chose Dana, so it's clearly biased toward cute things. Or, you absolutely terrified it with your aura, while she is Fox Charm passively active. Elder Alex thought, but declined to speak. Now, I want to see what the Carl is going to do with the bear. Do you think that you can do it while we're in the dungeon? Or will it have to wait for after? Carl shook his head. It will have to wait for after. I would need to exit to do the transfer, as I can't bring her in when we've already got 5 people, and even if I could, that would likely mess everything up for the run. So, Dana will hold our new fluffy friend, and we will finish the dungeon. He couldn't pull Lotus into the dungeon, and he couldn't easily access the tiny world from inside the instance. So, it would simply have to wait until they finished. Alright, let's get through the last boss, and we can take our loot to go. Elder Socrate suggested. Standing around debating how to use the quest attached to the bear wouldn't help anything. Dana looked down at the little bear in her arms, then handed the ball of fluff to Thor. Hold on to this one. I have work to do, and we've got spare tanks. Thor chuckled as he patted the little bear's head. Don't worry, I'll take good care of her. Just go and do your thing, we will be fine. The golems gathered around to prepare for the final battle, while Hawk finished gathering snacks for his meat pile. Once they were all back, Carl led the way, shifting into avatar form as he did. That was the only real option, as the spirit bear tyrant was 10 meters tall, and anything less would not be able to physically restrain it, only try to keep its attention. Normally, you would not try to restrain a boss. That was simply not practical for 90% of the visitors to the dungeon. But more than that, most of the visitors were in groups from multiple clans and didn't truly trust their teammates, not to try to assassinate them if they were locked in combat with the boss. Only a few of the largest clans could boast a large enough variety of ascended immortal elders that they could do this sort of dungeon all alone. The rest were too heavily specialized and needed to pick up outside assistance to make the process run smoothly at this level. Some refused and simply went for easier dungeons, using small groups of warriors to eliminate full spirit or void stage dungeons. But the rewards for that were much lower, even before the system penalized you for using an overranked group. The boss immediately determined that Carl was the greatest threat and turned to engage him, letting Carl turn it away from the rest of the group. So, it was only Thor, standing at the back, that noticed the sad look the little bear was giving the boss. Don't worry, little one. We will end its suffering and stop it from going crazy. Then we will get you settled into your new home, where a friendly priestess will cuddle you all day long. The little bear seemed to understand him and made a happy noise before licking his hand. Thor was deliberately standing back, well out of range of the area attacks that the boss was using. It had a version of Gravity Slam that is used as a stomp attack with its 2 front feet that shook everyone who was on the ground, meaning everyone but Dana, Hawk, and Kara. Hawk and Kara were overhead, bombarding the bear with attacks, while Dana was hovering over the elders, keeping herself in range of Tion's healing. Leo floated up into the sky to join her once he realized that the skill only hit things on the ground, and continued his work trying to bind the boss with vines. It wasn't going well, they kept tearing. But he couldn't figure out the tribulation chains that Thor could use. He just wasn't attuned to lightning like that. He didn't need to worry, though. The boss was large enough that most of the golems could attack it from melee range, and it showed no signs of turning away from Carl. It was just soaking up the damage, and its health was falling fast. Predation had stacked up against the other spirit bears, so Ray's bonus was making this entirely too easy on the group, when combined with the many layers of bleeding and poison damage that they had inflicted. Socrate noticed Remy's confused glance at the ease they were dispatching the boss and smiled at the little Naga. It's immune to physical attacks. Nearly every other group struggles to even den its health, but we've got dozens of golems doing fire damage, plus poison and bleeding damage, that appears to be blood elemental, not physical damage. That's a neat trick. I will have to ask Ray about that later. But rest assured, it's simply group composition, not an unusually easy boss. That made sense to Remy. There were too many warriors in the world, so the system had put a boss in this dungeon specifically to punish them for existing. They deserved it. Chapter 1728. Quest rewards for everyone. The final boss fell, and another purple loot chest appeared, along with a system notification floating in the air. Dungeon clear. Hidden quest enabled. Everyone in the group saw the quest information pop up in their own interface at the same time. Group quest. Find an appropriate home for the orphaned spirit bear. If successful, the chosen caretaker will receive a special class option. Group members will be rewarded based on the suitability of the pairing. Remy hissed in pleasure. Surely, it would give them good things now. Perhaps specialty plants that spirit bears like to eat? She could use some new plants. Carl opened the tiny world now that the dungeon was officially complete, and waved for Ophelia to join them as he grabbed Lotus and turned her to face the dungeon. That was all he needed to do. The moment that she saw the baby spirit bear, her eyes lit up with joy, and she leapt out of the tiny world to grab and cuddle it. The little bear laughed as it wrapped her in a hug and rolled around on the grass with a petite cleric. She was just the right size for hugs, an even better fit than the fox girl had been. Ophelia joined them in the space and shook her head in dismay. You know you're not getting that bear back, right? We were kind of hoping that you were looking to adopt. I know it's sudden, but that little girl needs a new home, and we've got a quest to find just the right placement. Carl explained. Ophelia watched the pair playing in the grass and slowly smiled. I suppose that adoption is a good choice. Eventually, we can teach it how to transform into a humanoid as well. Then, it will be able to join the hatchlings at school. Or, it can start in bear form. They're all in dragon form anyhow. Perfect. Now, we just need Lotus to actually read her system messages so that she can complete the binding, and we're done. Ophelia chuckled. Give her 5 minutes, and she will start to slow down enough to notice what else is happening. She's been busy making new barbecue recipes this morning and hasn't gotten her daily dose of hatchling cuddles. The elders laughed at the mythic priestess. She had clearly just advanced to mythic as well. They could feel the instability of her aura. But she seemed to be perfectly paired with the bear, so if nothing else went wrong, they should get their reward. Sure enough, about 5 minutes later, Lotus noticed that she had a message. Permanently adopt the bear? Fee. Can we have a baby bear? I promise to take good care of her. Ophelia gave her an indulgent pat on the head. I already talked it over with Carl, and it's fine. We will adopt this bear as our very own. The little bear looked up at the large brown furred bear, and then rolled back onto its feet to sniff at her. She smelled safe, nearly the same as the little priestess. That was a good sign. Of course, part of that was just Lotus scent rubbed off on Ophelia, and the rest was that they used the same bath products. But the little one wasn't thinking of that. Quest complete. Calculating suitability of the pairing. Lotus squealed with joy before going still as she entered the class change screen, and the system brought up its update. Suitability calculated 105%. The elders chuckled at the system message. That was their assessment as well. The spirit bears should be perfectly peaceful most of the time, relying on the fact that no natural predators could hurt them to live their lives in peace. And this super happy priestess-turned-chef had married a werbear. So not only was she taking it in, the bear was getting adopted as a member of the family. Lotus came back to her senses and grabbed the little bear to spin it in happy circles. "Look at me. I am the beast master now," she giggled. "Oh, gods no." Dana sighed. "Does this fall under all things are pets, or, if not friend, why friend-shaped?" Thor pondered. "It really could be either. Possibly both." Elder Alex noted. "Well, it seems like life is about to get interesting. Should I prepare for Lotus to start trying to adopt a dozen new beasts?" Ophelia asked. Carl shook his head. "No, it's one per rank, so she's not going to get another until immortality. That's only 2 adopted fluffy children. I'm sure that you can manage that." "Oh, that's not so bad. She has plans to start a whole farm just for fluffy things, but I think that now she's got an adopted daughter, I can distract her from it." System reward calculated. A chest appeared in the air as the system message notified them all that the quest was complete. Elder Alex tapped the box, opening it, and a new system message popped up. Bonuses for quest completion are automatically distributed. Bonus for quest acceptance, choice of recipient, and suitability of recipient applied. Carl, Dana, and Elder Kushal all cheered at the same time, while the other 2 elders stared at the items in their hands. They had both received identical amulets of limited invulnerability, physical damage. Unlike the regular spell, the amulets ignored 20% of the wearer's life worth of damage, but only physical damage. Still, an item truly worthy of its peerless grade status. However, it paled in comparison to what the others had received. Skill Book, Summons Spirit Bear Tyrant, Epic Grade Summoning Ability. Summons 1 Spirit Bear Tyrant to protect the caster. Oh, this is most excellent. And it's a new one that the skill repository does not have. Elder Kushal mumbled. Remy looked up from the armful of bamboo shoots that she had received. "Oh, a new summoning. That's going to be so much fun. I wonder why you got it but not the other 2. "I can't use summoning skills." Elder Socrate replied with a shrug. "My class is a bit more specialized, as I was focusing on my alchemy skills when I chose it." He was still shaman adjacent, but not a purely shamanistic class that could call on a spirit bear. Alex, on the other hand, was an avenger, an advanced form of paladin. He was also not the sort that could summon bears. Elder Kushal sighed. "Now, we need to decide who will give up their copy to the repository to be copied, instead of learning it right now. Fear not, I have a skill for that. You can use yours, and the repository can purchase Dana's as I will teach her the skill through our soul bond." Elder Socrate rolled his eyes. He knew perfectly well that Carl could just teach her the skill anyhow. He had a skill for it. In fact, he could teach Kushal as well, and let the man sell his copy to the repository. "Don't be stingy. You can give Dana's copy to your guild's blue dragon, and Kushal can sell his to the repository. Just teach them both." Chapter 1729. Summon Shared. Carl sighed dramatically as he activated "Follow Me, Little One," to grant the Summon Spirit Bear Tyrant spell to both Kushal and Dana. Pet Sitter Carl offers knowledge, epic skill, Summon Spirit Bear Tyrant, will be granted to the brooding shaman Kushal. Pet Sitter Carl offers knowledge, epic skill, Summon Spirit Bear Tyrant, will be granted to his Dana Mage. Carl chuckled as the system called her his Dana Mage again, but the real entertainment was Kushal, who had never experienced the skill before. He was looking stunned, staring between the skill book in his hands and Carl. "You really can use that old woman's skill?" Carl nodded. "Indeed. It's got a different name, but that is mostly a difference between systems, as the effect is identical. Now, we've got 2 spare copies of the book, one for the Darklight host, and one for the clan. That will let both groups pass it to the ones who can make proper copies for the library and make it a fully available skill. Today has been a wonderfully productive day, and not just for Lotus." The elder smiled at the little cleric, now a beast master, who had pulled Ophelia down to sit with her and her new bear. They were quietly arguing about what the bear should be named, with all 3 of them apparently holding different opinions on the topic. Lotus was aiming for Fluffzilla, which was being roundly rejected by both others. Ophelia wanted to name the bear Tifa, which Lotus insisted was too boring, while the bear wanted to be a rumbling roar that translated to the peaceful protector of forest streams. That one would never work, as when Lotus tried to pronounce it, the noise came out more like purring, and it made both of them laugh every single time. In contrast, Ophelia could pronounce it perfectly, and the cub was inordinately pleased that she approved of the name. All right, I need to send you three back to the tiny world so that we can make a normal exit from the dungeon. Let me know if you have any sorts of issues. But before you go, I have advice for you. The slow burn skill tree that includes the skill master ability is the most powerful of the three, and it will allow you to grow your existing healing skills as you use them. Having overrank healing, or increasing a healing skill to an epic grade version will be a huge benefit for you, even more than it has been for me. Lotus jumped up and hugged him. I totally will. This class is going to be great. I will find the perfect name for my new daughter, and then I will reach immortality and join you and Dana on missions again. Carl patted her on the head. I am looking forward to it. Once everyone is immortal, we can start doing group activities all the time. And you'll be able to make even more new things for the kitchen. They've got some lovely things here, and they cook for thousands every day. Lotus giggled. I'm teaching the bunnies mystic cooking as soon as I figure out how. That's a Carl skill, and I've got the Carl class now, so I should be able to do it eventually. The elders looked horrified. Giving the rare class to a green dragon cleric was a mistake. A gigantic mistake in a way that they had never considered before. They had been thinking of the dangers of a powerful green dragon cleric, but they hadn't considered what would happen when said cleric made friends with the mortal servants that every clan kept around to do menial tasks. The new home kept bunnies, and the green dragons were extremely fond of them. If this one could figure out how to awaken system skills for them all, the clan would be put in a rather awkward position. Who wanted to be known as the first one to turn the species of domestic helpers into fellow immortals? It was hard to imagine the bunnies rising up against them. But it wasn't impossible to imagine. Many of the clans mistreated the bunnies, even if the new home treated them pretty decently. So, even a visitor from one of the wrong clans could become an issue if they had immortal bunnies running around the clan compound. It almost seemed inevitable now. Once Lotus got it in her head that the bunnies should be able to use mystic cooking, she wouldn't give up on it. Especially if it meant bunnies in the kitchen with her. Technically, they were in the kitchen now, but not cooking, so they were in and out constantly. Having them serve the food was much less close contact than having them standing next to you as you baked and worked the grill. Though, now that he thought of it, that sort of close contact might actually be good for everyone. The sense of usefulness would build confidence in the bunnies, and the constant fluff would keep the green dragons calm. If it really needed to be stopped, the clan leader could deal with it. But she had to know what the Dark Light host was like. The other elders assumed that she had some connection to them, as so many had arrived to help her during the clan war. Surely, they wouldn't have come just because they had two newly advanced immortal clan members in the fight. It had to be related to the clan leader in some way. Ophelia picked up the bear under one arm and Lotus under the other, before walking into the portal to the tiny world. Say goodbye to the nice elders. Goodbye. Roar. Carl laughed as he let the portal close behind them. The little one hadn't even used a word. She had literally just said roar and bear. She was going to get along famously with Lotus. All right, now we can head for the entrance and pretend that things went normally. Do you think we should brag a little on getting an epic skill book? Elder Socrate shook his head. No. Let them think we're farming materials for storage, not taking all the lucky drops home with us. Chapter 1730. Bonus active. All of the summons were dismissed, and the beasts returned to their spaces. Reluctantly on the part of Kara and Remy, who both wanted to explore this place a bit more, even though they'd already been checking the area for anything worth taking and found nothing. However, Remy had bamboo to plant in the swamp of her space. That was the priority, as it was a high-grade resource and a new plant that she didn't have. She had other types of bamboo, but this one was special and was considered a rare grade resource by the system. The team stepped back out of the portal, where a few groups were still staging, waiting for their time to enter. There was only a 1-minute limit between groups, so mostly it was a matter of planning and making sure everyone had what they needed. The final boss was a nightmare for most groups, despite being the easiest of the three for Carl's group. When the last of them stepped outside, a system notice appeared in the air over the portal. New boss kill record time set by the new home merchant clan. Iron Man bonus activated, 60 minutes of bonus rewards from repeated clearances. Everyone stared up at the message, then at the group, who had just exited. Well, it looks like we're turning around and going back inside, Dana noted in a dry tone. Elder Socrate sighed. I think that you're right. We will have to discuss the payment for the extra runs afterward, since we're on a timer. The Telhusto elders will surely understand that it's a system bonus. Carl nodded and immediately turned to enter the portal again. The visitors to the portal began to cheer as they realized what had happened. The boss clear records rarely changed, so most forgot that it could happen without sending a group of clan leaders to deliberately alter it to see if it gave rewards. Once they were back inside, Carl saw that the dungeon was fully reset, but the lighting had changed, and there was a large timer over the top of the center of the instance. All right, this is going to get messy. We will rush straight for the bosses, while the golems and summons clear the rest of the dungeon. Not a full clear straight through. Even if we miss a few, it shouldn't hurt the loot too much. Don't spend a time to randomize, just grab and go. The loot should be good enough with the bonus. Elder Alex smiled as Carl began issuing orders. The pet sitter was a natural-born leader, but some of that was likely from growing up with a team of beasts that needed directions to prevent them going off and doing their own thing. Especially the badger. The new bears appeared, every bit as intimidating as summons as they had been as the boss. They were even the same size, not a degraded version. That was going to be a nasty shock for anything that they came across. All the boss monsters let loose on the dungeon. First the Carl, then Oathbreaker, Thor, and now the tyrants. Kara cheered. Carl laughed as he made a shooing motion for the badger to join the teams clearing the mobs ahead of him. They needed a clear path to the boss if they weren't going to be delayed too much. That didn't seem likely. There were too many groups along the main route to the boss, and the woods were the same. If you entered, you pulled more monsters. So they were going to have to do some fighting. However, the summoned creatures had split up the same as they did for the bear section. Split into 4 groups, they could fight their way forward smoothly and leapfrog each other to keep the clear going. Change of plans, finish the clear as we go. Soon, things will only need a few hits to finish them when we arrive, and I've got mana pylons, so there is no need to hold back on the heavy damage skills. The spirit bears roared happily as they reached combat, and Dana shook her head in dismay. This isn't even going to be a fight. The majority of the dungeon is completely incapable of damaging them. Even without limited invulnerability, they are immune to physical damage. Elder Alex sighed. I wish I could learn that skill. That is absolutely broken. Now, don't get me wrong, this new amulet is spectacular. But having that bear to take the damage for me would be so much better. Well, you know what elder to take with you now. And soon, more of the druid and other compatible classes will have it, Dana joked. She wasn't actually certain how many classes could even use the summoning skill for the spirit bear tyrant. But some of the druid-related ones certainly should be able to. It was the sort of skill that their class gave them at lower power levels. The bears also did an impressive amount of damage. Not as much as Oathbreaker, especially when they had multiple groups engaged, and his damage-spreading skill would hit everything. But more than any of the other golems, despite their defensive focus. With the damage focused, and everyone burning through mana to clear faster, they nearly marched through the first group. It was under 10 seconds before they were finished, and the group was moving forward again, jogging to the second pack. Indomitable, Leo's skill to prevent exhaustion was going to be invaluable for this run, as everyone was going to be moving fast. If Carl's mental calculation was right, they should be able to get 2 full runs in under an hour, and might even get started on a third. That could add up to a lot of bonus loot. The clan only expected them to do 1 today, so 3 was already good. 3 with better than average loot would make everyone happy. Everyone but Kara, who wanted to roll for better loot at every box. Even if it reduced the quantity.